During our vacation in Paris, my husband insisted on exploring the city alone at night. Suspicious, I followed him and saw him enter a rooftop bar. Minutes later, a stunning French woman wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "Your wife will never know." Heart racing, I filmed everything. At breakfast, I played the video and asked, "Care to explain your Parisian adventure?" His face turned white as our tour guide suddenly looked away. Our Paris trip was supposed to be a dream. My husband, Mark, and I had been planning it for years: romantic walks along the Seine, fresh croissants in cozy cafes, and sightseeing at all the spots we'd only ever seen in movies. It was meant to be perfect. But something felt off from the moment we arrived. Mark was distracted. He kept checking his phone, his responses short and distant. I tried brushing it off as jet lag, but the way he kept looking around, like he was searching for someone, made my stomach twist. On our first night, we had dinner at a little bistro near our hotel. Candlelight flickered between us, the food was incredible, and couples all around us were deep in conversation, laughing and clinking glasses. But Mark? He barely touched his meal. He kept glancing at his phone, and at one point, he even turned his screen away when I leaned in. I forced a smile. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," he said quickly, shoving his phone into his pocket. "Just work stuff." Work stuff. In Paris. On vacation. At 10 p.m. I let it slide, but a cold feeling settled in my chest. The next morning, Mark was up early, pacing near the window while I was still tangled in the hotel sheets. When he noticed I was awake, he turned to me with an odd expression. "I was thinking," he started, rubbing the back of his neck, "maybe tonight I'll go explore the city on my own for a bit. Just walk around, take it all in." My body tensed. "Alone?" He nodded. "You don't mind, do you? You always say you like winding down early." I thought I'd just go for a night walk, clear my head. I stared at him. He was saying all the right things, using the right tone, but I wasn't stupid. Mark had never been the kind of guy to randomly go for a walk, especially not in a foreign city. He wasn't adventurous like that. And why did he look so anxious asking me? Something was wrong. I forced a smile. "Sure. Sounds nice." His shoulders relaxed, and he kissed my forehead like he always did. "Thanks, babe. We'll have the whole day together before then." We spent the afternoon sightseeing, and Mark seemed back to normal, holding my hand, making bad jokes, pointing out little things he knew I'd like. It almost made me second-guess myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But that night, when he left the hotel, that feeling came rushing back. I waited exactly 5 minutes before grabbing my coat and slipping out behind him. I kept my distance, heart pounding as I followed him down the cobblestone streets of Paris. He didn't look back once. He walked with purpose, like he knew exactly where he was going. After about 20 minutes, he reached a rooftop bar. I ducked behind a corner as he stepped inside, my breath shaky. What was he doing here? I crept closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the glass doors, I could see him at the bar. He ordered a drink, checked his phone. Then, a woman slid into the seat next to him. She was stunning. Dark hair, red lips, dressed effortlessly elegant in a way only French women seem to manage. And the way she smiled at him, my stomach dropped. I pulled out my phone and hit record. It only took a few minutes for the damning moment to happen. She leaned in, wrapping her arms around him from behind, and whispered something close to his ear. He laughed. Then she said it, clear as day, "Your wife will never know." I felt my whole body go cold. Mark didn't push her away. He didn't look shocked. He just smiled and took a slow sip of his drink. I swallowed the lump in my throat, steadying my shaking hands as I filmed every second. My husband. My Mark. The man I trusted more than anyone. Sitting there, smiling, letting another woman touch him, whisper in his ear like it was the most natural thing in the world. I wanted to burst through the doors. I wanted to scream, throw my ring in his face, demand answers right then and there. But I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked back to the hotel, my fingers gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I sat awake all night, the video replaying in my head. Over and over. By the time morning came, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Mark walked into the hotel room like nothing had happened, humming to himself as he kicked off his shoes. "Morning, babe." I didn't answer. I just reached for my phone, hit play, and slid it across the table toward him. He froze. His face drained of color. And that's when I noticed something else. Our tour guide, who had been waiting by the door to take us out for breakfast, suddenly looked away. Like she already knew. Mark stared at the screen, his face turning ghostly pale. The video played between us, the soft hum of the rooftop bar's music barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The woman. The way she touched him. The words she whispered. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then, his hand shot out, scrambling for the phone like he could somehow erase what I had seen. But I was faster. I snatched it back, gripping it so tightly my fingers ached. Care to explain your Parisian adventure? My voice came out colder than I expected. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes darted to the side, to our tour guide, Claire, who had suddenly gone very, very still near the doorway. That's when I knew. She knew. I turned to her. Something you want to say? Claire hesitated, shifting her weight like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I think I should go. No. My voice came out sharper than I intended. You stay right there. She swallowed hard, avoiding my gaze. Mark finally found his voice. It's not what you think, Anna. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Oh, really? Because it looks exactly like what I think. He ran a hand through his hair, his breathing uneven. I was meeting an old friend. That's all. I tilted my head. An old friend who thinks I'll never know? Who wraps her arms around you and whispers in your ear like some bad movie cliché. She was joking. I scoffed. Joking? Yes. His voice rose, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of anger behind his panic. Like somehow, he was the one who had the right to be upset. You're blowing this out of proportion, Anna. Nothing happened. I held up the phone. Nothing happened? You looked pretty damn comfortable for someone doing nothing. He rubbed his temples, muttering a curse under his breath. Then, just as I opened my mouth to push further, Claire finally spoke. Anna, maybe we should talk alone. Mark shot her a look so sharp I could almost feel the air crackle. Claire flinched, but she stood her ground. My pulse quickened. You know something, I said slowly, eyes locking onto her. Don't you? She exhaled shakily, then looked between Mark and me. I shouldn't be involved in this, she stammered. I stepped closer. Claire, please. Mark took a sudden step toward her. Claire. His tone was a warning. She clenched her jaw, her hands balling into fists at her sides. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she said, This isn't the first time. The room tilted. I felt the air rush out of my lungs like I'd been punched. My fingers loosened, and my phone nearly slipped from my grasp. What? My voice cracked. Claire hesitated again, but then she seemed to make up her mind. She squared her shoulders, inhaling deeply. I've seen him with her before. Twice. At different places. A slow, ringing sound filled my ears. Mark's jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. Claire, shut up. She ignored him. The first time was 2 nights ago, she went on, her voice steadier now. I was at a bar with some friends, and I saw him at a corner table with her. They were close, whispering. I thought it was just some misunderstanding. Then, last night, I saw them again before I came to pick you two up for dinner. Same woman. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might throw up. You were with her before? My voice barely came out. Mark rubbed his face, looking anywhere but at me. It's not like that. I took a shaky breath, my head spinning. So explain. Right now. He didn't. Instead, he turned on Claire. You have no idea what you're talking about. She flinched but stood her ground. I let out a humorless laugh. Wow, that's your defense? Not a denial, just attacking her. Mark turned back to me, eyes pleading now. Anna, please. It's complicated. I glared at him. Make it uncomplicated. He swallowed hard. I can't. A bitter, ugly silence settled between us. Then, in a low, shaky voice, I asked, Are you in love with her? Mark's reaction was instant. His eyes widened slightly, and his lips parted, but no words came. That was enough of an answer. Claire inhaled sharply, like even she hadn't expected that. Mark finally exhaled, running both hands down his face. It's not what you think. Then say it, I pressed, heart hammering. Silence. I turned to Claire. What else? She hesitated, then sighed. Last night, I stayed outside the bar for a while after I saw them. I was debating whether I should tell you. Anne. I saw them leave together. The world tilted again. Leave together. Claire kept going, voice soft. I don't know where they went. But they left. And he didn't look like a man who was just saying goodbye to an old friend. Mark let out a shaky breath, rubbing the back of his neck. This is ridiculous. You're turning this into something it's not. I stared at him, my heart splitting open. I followed you, I said. That caught him off guard. His whole body stiffened. I followed you, I repeated, my voice breaking slightly. I saw you walk to the bar. I saw you waiting for her. I saw everything. Mark opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. Stop lying. His lips pressed together. Something inside me shattered. Claire shifted uncomfortably. Anna, I shook my head. I couldn't hear any more. Mark took a deep breath. Can we talk about this privately? I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, now you want privacy? Funny, you didn't care about that when you were sneaking around Paris with your old friend. His jaw tensed. Please. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man I had loved for years. The man I had trusted. The man I thought I knew. And for the first time, I realized I didn't know him at all. Mark was still staring at me, his lips parted like he had more to say, but no words were coming out. Claire stood awkwardly near the door, shifting her weight from foot to foot, like she was afraid she had already said too much. The room felt too small, like the walls were closing in. Then my phone vibrated. I looked down, my pulse still racing from everything that had just unraveled. Unknown number. New message. I frowned. My hands were still trembling as I tapped the screen. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. But you deserve the truth. Meet me at Café Lucien at noon. I'll tell you everything. Come alone. My breath hitched. Mark must have seen the change in my expression because he tensed. What is it? I quickly locked my phone. Nothing. His eyes narrowed slightly. Anna. I turned to Claire. How did you know her name? Claire blinked. What? The woman, I said, voice steady but sharp. You called her, her. But you never asked for her name. You didn't even describe her. And yet, you knew exactly who I was talking about. Claire paled. Mark's head snapped toward her, his whole body rigid. I felt my stomach twist. Claire, how long have you known? Silence. The kind that made my ears ring. Then she swallowed hard. I don't, Mark snapped. I whipped around to face him. Oh, so now you suddenly have something to say? Claire's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She exhaled shakily. 2 months. The air left my lungs. 2 months. I had to grip the back of the chair to steady myself. Mark's head dropped into his hands. Jesus Christ. I forced myself to breathe. And you never thought to tell me? Claire looked like she wanted to crawl into a hole. I didn't know how. I thought maybe it was just a mistake. That it wouldn't happen again. Mark let out a low, humorless laugh. Oh, that's rich. I turned to him, my blood boiling. You don't get to act like the victim here. He looked up at me, something dark in his eyes. And you don't get to act like you didn't know something was wrong. The words cut deep. Because, in a way, he was right. I had known something was off for months, his distance, the late-night texts, the sudden work trips. But I had told myself I was being paranoid. That I was overthinking. Claire's voice was small. I'm sorry, Anna. I didn't even know who I was angrier at, Mark, Claire, or myself. Mark ran a hand down his face. Look. I'll explain everything. Just not here. Not now. I let out a sharp breath. Fine. I turned on my heel, grabbing my bag and shoving my phone inside. Where are you going? He asked quickly. I didn't look at him. For a walk. Then I left. Paris was beautiful, but I barely saw it. I walked for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of everything. The unknown number. The text. The fact that my husband had been cheating on me for at least 2 months, maybe longer. I finally stopped at a small bench near the Seine, my breath shaky. I pulled out my phone, staring at the message again. Café Lucien. Noon. Come alone. My gut told me to go. And so, at exactly 11:55, I stepped inside the cafe. It was small, tucked into a quiet street corner, filled with locals rather than tourists. A few people sat by the windows, drinking espresso, flipping through newspapers. And then I saw her. The woman from the video. She was sitting in the back, wearing dark sunglasses and a sleek black coat. She looked up the moment I walked in, her lips pressing into a thin line. I made my way over, my heart pounding. She didn't smile. She didn't even look nervous. You came, she said, her voice smooth and accented. I sat down. Start talking. She sighed, removing her sunglasses and setting them on the table. Her dark eyes met mine. I didn't know about you, she said quietly. Not at first. I clenched my fists. How long? She hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, a year. The cafe seemed to blur. A year? I choked out. She nodded, eyes flicking down to her coffee. I met him last summer. He told me he was single. We started seeing each other. And then, a few months ago, I found out. I swallowed hard. So why are you telling me this now? She exhaled, rubbing her temples. Because I'm done lying for him. The weight of it all settled on me like bricks. A whole year. While I was planning vacations, buying anniversary gifts, trying to be the best wife I could be, he was here. With her. Living another life. I forced myself to breathe. Did you love him? She looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw something that almost looked like pity. I thought I did. A heavy silence stretched between us. Then she glanced around, lowering her voice. There's something else you should know. I swallowed, my pulse quickening. What? She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. He's lying about more than just us. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? She lowered her voice even more. I don't think Mark is who you think he is. The words sent a ripple of unease through me. I frowned. What are you talking about? She leaned back in her chair, studying me. Did he tell you why he wanted to come to Paris? I blinked. What? Did he say why he wanted this trip? I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because the truth was, he hadn't. The trip had been his idea, out of nowhere. He had insisted on Paris, even when I had suggested Italy. He had planned every detail, down to the exact dates. And when I asked why, he had just smiled and said, because it's romantic. A sick feeling curled in my stomach. I looked at her. Tell me everything. And she did. And by the time she finished, my whole world had cracked open. I gripped the edge of the cafe table, my whole body cold despite the heat pressing in through the window. Mark had been lying about more than just the affair. The woman, her name was Camille, watched me carefully, giving me a moment to process before she spoke again. He didn't bring you here for a romantic getaway, she said, her voice low. He brought you here to cover his tracks. My stomach twisted. Cover his tracks from what? She hesitated, glancing around the cafe, as if checking for listening ears. Then she leaned in, speaking barely above a whisper. Mark owes people money, she said. A lot of money. I froze. What? My voice cracked. She nodded, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. I found out a few months ago. He got involved with the wrong people, something about gambling, bad investments. I don't know all the details, but I know this, he's in deep. I shook my head, my heart hammering. No, that's not possible. Camille sighed. Anna, I didn't tell you this to hurt you. I told you because you need to understand. He's desperate. My breath was coming too fast. I gripped my phone, my mind racing. Desperate. Mark had planned this whole trip. Insisted on Paris. What if this wasn't just about an affair? What if this was about something bigger? I shot up from my seat. I have to go. Camille grabbed my wrist before I could turn away. Be careful, she said, her eyes dark with something I couldn't quite place. Mark isn't the man you think he is. I yanked my arm free and walked out of the cafe. By the time I reached our hotel, I was shaking. I didn't even hesitate. I stormed inside, past the front desk, past the tourists sipping espresso in the lounge. My blood was pounding in my ears as I shoved open our hotel room door. Mark was sitting on the edge of the bed, his phone in his hand. He looked up, startled. Anna, I threw my bag down. You lying piece of shit. His whole body tensed. What? I stalked toward him, my hands shaking. You didn't just cheat on me. You lied about everything. He frowned, setting his phone down. Anna, you're in debt, I snapped. Aren't you? Mark's face drained of color. I let out a hollow laugh. There it is. He swallowed hard. Where did you hear that? Does it matter? My voice was sharp, cutting. Camille told me. She told me everything. Mark's jaw tightened. That bitch, don't you dare, I seethed, stepping closer. You don't get to be angry. You don't get to act like you're the victim here. He stood up abruptly, raking a hand through his hair. I can explain. Then explain. I crossed my arms, my heart slamming against my ribs. Go ahead. Explain why you've been sneaking around with her for a year. Explain why you dragged me to Paris. Explain why you're lying to me. Mark clenched his jaw, his hands flexing at his sides. He looked away for a second, exhaling hard. Then, finally, he spoke. I didn't plan to cheat, he said, voice low. It just happened. I let out a bitter laugh. Right. Because affairs always just happen. I was in a bad place, he went on. Work was slow. I made some stupid investments. Lost a lot of money. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to see me like that. I shook my head. So you what? Found comfort in someone else. His silence was my answer. Something inside me cracked. I clenched my fists. And the debt? Mark let out a shaky breath, finally meeting my eyes. It's bad, Anna. I owe people money. Dangerous people. I swallowed hard. How bad? His throat bobbed. 150,000. The air rushed out of my lungs. I staggered back, gripping the edge of the table to keep myself upright. 150, I was trying to fix it, he cut in. I swear. I let out a hollow laugh. How? By screwing another woman. His jaw tensed. No. By coming here. I frowned. What does that mean? Mark inhaled sharply, his hands shaking slightly. There's someone here. Someone who can help. But I needed a reason to come without it looking suspicious. That's why I planned the trip. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Our entire vacation, I whispered, was just a cover-up? He didn't answer. Tears burned the back of my eyes, but I refused to cry. I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers to my temples. So let me get this straight. You're cheating on me. You're drowning in debt. And you lied about why we were here. Mark swallowed hard. Anna, I held up a hand. No. We're done. His eyes widened. Wait, I mean it, I said, my voice firmer than I thought possible. I'm done, Mark. Something flickered in his expression, panic, desperation. Please, he said, stepping closer. Anna, I can fix this. I just need time, I scoffed. You've had a year. His jaw clenched. I love you. I flinched. The words sounded so empty now. I shook my head, stepping back. You don't love me, Mark. You love what I represent. Stability. Safety. The life you're too much of a coward to admit you already burned to the ground. Mark's breath hitched. I grabbed my bag and turned for the door. Where are you going? He asked quickly. I looked back at him one last time. Away from you. Then I walked out. I sat by the Seine for hours, staring at the water, the weight of everything settling onto my chest. I had spent years building a life with a man I didn't even know. A man who lied so easily, so naturally, that I had believed him even when my gut screamed not to. I should have listened to my instincts. I should have left sooner. But as I watched the sun set over Paris, I realized something. I was free. Mark was still trapped in his mess, still tangled in his own lies. But me? I was finally walking away. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I was going to be okay.